Hey guys, Ava here at DC Cycle, and today we are here for another one-day cam install for the Wood 22XE cam. So, Jim, give us a little rundown of what you want to do today.
Well, we're going to do the cam and the oil pump and the cam plate and lifters. Bike's got about 50,000 miles on it, so it's time to freshen it up a little bit. Maybe get a little more horsepower out of it.
Good deal. Where are you from, Jim?
I live in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Awesome. We like the 22XE. That's one of our favorite. You obviously got an awesome bike. Do most of your riding, is it you and your wife,
Yep.
Taryn?
Yep.
Good deal. All right, Ava, anything to add?
Nope, let's get it started. This bike is a 2019 Harley Ultra with everything stocked except for the exhaust. Today all we're changing is the cam, the lifters, and the manifold. So Dad, you want to give us some intel on that?
Yeah, so we're going to put the S&S 55 mil throttle body on it. We're going to put new lifters in it. We're going to put 6.2 injectors in it. And we're doing the Wood M8-22XE, of course. Customer does a lot of two-up riding, got 50,000 miles on his bike, a little worried about his lifters. So when he's in there doing it, he wants to do it right and get a little extra power out of it. Okay guys, did the base run. As you've seen, we ended up with the two runs, 86 and 87 horsepower, 108 and 106 torque. Of course, you can see the graph that the tune is pretty far off on it, so that's going to have a lot to do with it. But that is our starting point and our base run. Let's see how good we can get it running for the guys.
We get this area here opened up. We're going to spend most of our time right here anyway. Okay, we're back here. We've got the intake off of the throttle body. Got that out of the way because we're going to be cutting these push rod tubes out. Taking all this out here, working on the cam chest. Took the horn bracket off the other side to make it easier to get to the intake bolts. Took the heat shields off, make it a little easier to get to these bolts, and also the tuner's going to have to put his fittings in these pipes. So they needed to come off anyway, so it'd just be better for me to go ahead and take them off. Next thing we're going to do is loosen up this exhaust and see if we can swing it out just a little. It won't take a whole lot. And then we can get the cam cover off, get the push rods cut, and go from there. And I got my old trusty piece of wood here that I like to use. I'll put me a rag around it. You know, if you can skip the part about pulling the exhaust off, it saves a lot of time. Just loosen those bolts here, here, back here, and this exhaust will swing out. This part back here won't move much. Even if you've got stretch bags, I've never had one hit. Okay? And like I said, if you can skip the part about pulling the exhaust completely off, you'll save a lot of time. All right, we're gonna get this cam cover off. Let the oil be draining out a bit. We'll take our push rod tubes loose and cut them and get started on the cam. Got the bolts out of the cam cover. These cam covers sometimes can be a little stubborn. The older the bike is, the harder they are to get off. You can usually just take a dead blow hammer, tap them a few times, and they'll usually come loose, just in case you have this problem. That one came loose real easy. And you got your oil. Make sure you got a pan to catch that oil. We got our exhaust out of the way so we can slide it right out. There's our cam chain, hydraulic tensioners, cam plate, and everything right there. So we're going to have to take these lifter covers off. If you're not changing lifter cuffs, then you don't even have to take these off. All four lifters will fall right out the bottom. It makes it a whole lot faster. Okay, we got the keepers off of our push rod tubes. You just basically just pop them off if you haven't got one of these tools to work with. If you got one of them, you just squeeze the spring down and take your little something and pop those off. And then push the push rods up. I left one here that's not pushed up yet. These M8 push rod tubes. They've got a different type of sealing ring here in the center. We've got an O-ring inside this knurl. It makes it a little bit harder to push them up. Then we will take our trusty bolt cutters and cut them. Okay, and they'll want to fall out. Okay, we got these out. Now we're putting Screaming Eagles back in it. So we're gonna have to save part of this. We're gonna need part of this. So we're gonna throw the old push rod loose. I haven't seen one of these leave. We're gonna need to keep this piece we pulled out of the top and the spring out of here, because we're getting black ones to go back on it. So we're gonna need to save this. And this basically the same thing for the other three. Cut the push rod, take them out, throw the push rods away, and keep the parts off of these tubes that we're gonna need. Okay, we're gonna remove these lifter covers. These four bolts here are pretty easy to get to. These four back here are a little harder. The wrench will try to hang up under these fins, so they're a little bit more aggravating. You can use a long ball end and a ratchet if you want to. It works pretty good. I usually just wind up using this, just a little short, long handled ratchet with a 3/16 bit in it. Usually what I use. So I'll go ahead and get those out and then we'll come back. There we go. They can be trouble. There we go. Got them off. Now these aren't marked front and rear. As far as I know, I haven't seen them marked, but they'll only go one way. But just to keep from having to try to figure it out, I just separate them front and rear. Now the next thing we got is these lifter cuffs here. These bolts right here are bad to break. We've had several of them break. They're not a real hard bolt. I've broke one. I've seen others break. Seems like to me when you're using a ratchet on them, every time you stop, they get harder to get started turning again. So I use this little 1/4 inch Milwaukee 3/8 socket, and I just go for broke. And I've never had one yet break once it started turning. With your ratchets, they'll try to hang up. Okay, there we go. These are what looks to be probably a grade 5 bolt. The ones that we'll put back in are a grade 8. They're a whole lot harder. We just lift those plastic lifter cuffs up and we'll throw them over here in the trash box. And now we got our lifters sticking up right here. And they should all pull right out the top unless there's something wrong with them. Okay? The oil hole on this one was facing to the rear. These were facing towards the front. And that one was facing to the rear. So we had three facing towards the rear and one facing towards the front. So the little oil hole dilemma, I see them facing all different directions. All 4 lifters came out the top, all 4 lifters will come out the bottom. So if we weren't putting lifter cuffs on, we wouldn't have took these lifter covers off and these lifter cuffs. Wouldn't have to take none of this off. We'd already have the cam and cam plate and everything out of it. All right, we're gonna pull our cam chain off, our sprockets. We'll get our hydraulic tensioner off. Take the bolts out of the cam plate and the oil pump, and we'll slide that out. We should have enough room here to get that oil pump out. We'll wait and see. If we don't, we'll get us a little bit more room. Okay, we got our sprockets, cam chain off, our tensioner. Now we'll take these bolts out. We'll take the 4 oil pump bolts out, and then we'll pull the cam plate and the oil pump out of it. We'll look and see if it's one of the updated oil pumps or if it's not. It's kind of borderline on this one. Okay, we got our bolts out of the cam plate. I've got these loose, but you got some short ones. And the oil pump, this is where you could have a little trouble not getting your pipe swung out enough, is these oil pump bolts here. They're pretty long. So you gotta have plenty of clearance to get it out past that pipe. So there's 4 long ones and the rest of them are short ones. Slide our pan out because our oil filter is going to drain now. The oil out of it's going to drain into our pan, and we're going to wind up losing somewhere around half a quart, maybe a little more. We got our cam plate off. There's the inside of it. The outside, nice and clean. The oil's nice and clean. Got our oil cam right here. Looks like pretty normal scuffing for 50,000 miles. Our oil pump, let's see if we can get it out. We'll look on the back. We'll count the number of teeth here. If it's got more than 8, it's the old style. So we're looking for 8 teeth. If it's got 8, we're good. So this one is not. Even though it's got the sealing ring, the oil pump is still outdated and needs to be replaced. After we look at that, we want to look inside here at this bearing. We can see that it's a stock bearing. You see the spaces between the rollers. I know it's kind of hard to see. If you see those spaces between the rollers, that's the stock inner cam bearing, which seem to fail every once in a while, and when they do, they can destroy the cases and send metal throughout the whole engine. Next thing we're going to do is check a run out on a crankshaft and see how much it is. And we're going to use a rear wheel to turn the engine to see how much run out this pinion's got on this end. Looks like we're going to have right at 4 thousandths run out. Okay, we'll take this tool back off and we'll pull our inner cam bearing out and put us a good one in it. And it's not a bad job if you got the tools. If you got the right tools to use, take it out, press it back in. Makes the job a whole lot nicer than it does if you just try to break it out of there. I'll shine this light in there. This tool here will go inside that bearing. We'll push that rod in and spread the end of that tool. And we'll put our puller plate on there. Put a nut and a washer on the puller. And I just use a crescent wrench that'll fit that nut, and then a 9/16 keep that from turning. Over here, that little pop, that bearing turns loose. That should do it. There's our bearing we just took out. All right, we got our old cam bearing out. This is a new one that we're putting back in. If you look at the two, you'll see one of them's got roller bearings all the way around it, little needle bearings, and the other one has spaces in between them. And these bearings here with the spaces, they seem to fail. I've seen it in several engines had bearing failure, and the owner kept riding it, and it wallowed out the case, sent metal through the whole engine, caused a lot of destruction and a lot of money. Okay, we'll get ready to put this in. Gotta get my puller set up and all, get it lubricated, and we'll push this one in. And like I said, if you got the right tool, it sure makes it a whole lot easier. It would be to try to hammer it in there. Okay, we got our bearing on our tool. We want to look for the markings on the bearing, and that's the side we want to push from. The side that has no markings goes in first. This side is made to push on. Okay, we'll get that in here. Make sure I got my tool right. Okay, we got our tool set up. We're going to push our bearing in. I had to use one Allen head bolt here because one of these would go in behind this pipe. Okay, now we got our bearing pushed in, proper depth. We'll take a little tool here. We're going to reach in there and make sure it'll roll. But sometimes that cage will distort and the bearing won't want to roll. We want to make sure it rolls good. And we'll have that part done. And we'll get the oil pump ready and put the oil pump in. We're getting ready to put the oil pump in. I was just looking at these two. Here's what we want to look for. See if we've got the updated oil pump. And this is the scavenge side of the oil pump. This is the side of the pump that pulls the oil out of the cam chest, out of the crankshaft cavity, and sends it back to the tank. And if you look at these teeth here, see this one should have 8 teeth. If you've got one like this, I believe this is 10, then you've got the old style. And it should be changed. So this is a 19, and it's got the old style pump in it. It did have the seal, but still got the old style pump. This pump here will have 8 teeth, plus it will have the seal that seals the bearing to help keep the pressure from pushing the oil away. Okay, this is the Screaming Eagle version, and this is stock 2019. You see that big W there? That's for water cooled engine. If it was an O, it would be for oil cooled engine. If you look at the teeth right here on the pressure side of the pump, see how thin that is? Okay, if this was for an oil cooled engine, that would be about twice as wide as that, maybe even more. It sends more oil to the top. Just being a water cooled engine, it doesn't need as much oil at the top, so they use a thinner gear. Okay, we'll get these oil pump lubed up and get it ready to go in. Okay, get ready to put this oil pump in. Got a seal on the back of it. Hope it will slide in behind that pipe. Got an O-ring inside the case here. And I always go ahead and put this O-ring here in too. It goes behind the cam plate just to make sure I don't forget. So we got a flat spot on our cam up on top. And we're going to see if we can get that to slide in there. And we got our flats lined up on our pump. Got our O-ring in the bottom, and we're going to get a hold of this and try to push it all at one time. It should kind of snap in. There it goes. Got plenty of lube on our oil pump. Make sure it's got plenty. We got our cam here, our Bobwood's 22XE. So, very good cam, had lots of good results with it. Make sure we got plenty of lube on it. And it just slides right in that bearing that we put in. Can put a little lube here. Well, I couldn't get to it with it in my hand. Okay. We'll get our cam plate ready. No Screaming Eagle cam plate from Harley. Got brass bushings in it. There's a cam and crank. The stock cam plate doesn't have that. It's just aluminum to aluminum. Well, this has the bushings. A little better piece. We'll make sure everything's got plenty of lube. Won't hurt a thing if it drips off. Cam plate's got one dial that it sits on. The twin cam has two. When you put it on there, it doesn't move. This one can move just a little. trouble getting it in there. And there it is. Got these, put the bolts in it, get it all lined up, let it find its happy spot, and we'll go from there. Okay, we got a oil pump, a cam plate assembled. We're getting ready to tighten these bolts on this cam plate. Remember I showed you it's got one dial pin on this cam plate, so this thing can move just a little. It's not a whole lot, but it's just a little. And the run out on the crank was 4 thousandths. So as that pinion shaft comes around on that crank, it's going to try to wiggle a little bit. So we want to let that thing, you know, find where it likes to be, a little here and a little there, to make it run as center as possible. So what I like to do is got all my screws just almost to the point where they will start having some pressure, and I like to go ahead and don't let that spit on you. That crankshaft will blow oil out sometimes. I like to roll it around a couple times, and I go by the flats right here where I'm at as far as going all the way around. And this is just the way I like to do it. Somebody else may do it a different way. But I've never had an issue with this. I'm just kind of bringing these up to where they're touching. The cam plate could actually still move if it was in a bind or anything because of the run out. And we're going to turn it some more, make sure it's not binding anything on us. The oil pump is doing what it needs to do. We're just going to snug these up just enough that it won't move. I'm not tightening them very tight, so there's really no particular order I need to follow at this time. Okay, so we got the cam plate snug where it won't move. Now we're going to watch the oil pump. We're going to pay attention to this rear wheel and make sure it's taking about the same amount of force to turn it. We're going to make sure that oil pump's not binding up. We get that flat at the top, okay, and that should be good now. We'll get these torqued down in the sequence. We're putting our gears back on. The crank gear, I got it on there. We're going to put the cam gear on there, then we're going to check it and make sure it's straight, that they're in line for this chain to run on. We don't want it to be way out or anything. I think we got allowed a tolerance of 9,000. Most all your stock bikes come with a 110 thousandths shim behind the cam gear. This one needs a 120. I've already put the gears up there and checked the alignment on them. Alignment tool down here at the bottom to hold it, and then that's going to snug that cam bolt. Make sure it's pushed in. I'm going to take this straight edge and set it on that bottom gear and sweep it in, and then check it and see if there's any slack between it. You can take the feeler gauge. You're allowed 9 thousandths. This one is almost perfect. It's really close using a 120 thousandths cam spacer. So now we'll take these back off, put the cam chain on it, put it back together, make sure our timing marks are in line. You can see them right under here, those 2 dots, that's your timing marks. And make sure they're lined up, and then go back together with the chain on. 2 years. Cam chain. Crank here. You can see the 2 timing marks here. Make sure they're lined up. And you should get the top one started first. And then the bottom one just kind of went on its own. And you can see the timing marks are lined up. And so now I'm going to take some carburetor cleaner and get the oil off of these threads and blow it out. Clean these bolts. Put some red Loctite on it and torque them. I do 25 on the crank and 35 on the cam. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We got our cam chain and gears on. Torqued our crank bolt to 25 foot-pounds and our cam bolt to 35 foot-pounds, and we're going to put our tensioner on. And there's a little confusion about these, about just sticking them up there and tightening the bolts. I understand that, but if I get my hand in there, get this bottom bolt started. Okay, if you just take it and just swing it up here and just stick it there, stick a bolt in it, it doesn't mean that the base of this thing is all the way up against the cam plate. So when you put that top bolt in, make sure it's pushed against the cam plate. And I've never had any trouble like that. But if you don't make sure it's pushed against the cam plate, you might have trouble when you're trying to torque it down. It will try to hang on that cam chain and the shoe. Pull it in right quick. 20-inch pounds. And that should be good. We'll be ready to put the lifters in. Okay, we are ready to put our lifters in. And there's always that question about the hose, the oil hose. I just don't think it really matters that much, because the way the lifter is made, it gets oil all the way around it, not just in one spot. I'm not sure these boards have any oil in them. Okay, I've already had our lifters in our vacuum cup. It's a tool we got from Jim's. I really like it. Okay, so you got your hole here on these lifters that's 90 degrees from the roller. You got your hole and then your roller here. If you look at the Harley lifter here, their oil hole is in line with the wheel. Okay, so there's no way to put them back in once they came out the same way. But if you look at this area here around the lifter, oil goes all the way around that. Goes right up to that hole. No matter which way you put it, it's going to get oil to that hole. Sure, it's best to put the hole where the oil will get to it the easiest, but you can't. So what I do is I turn the holes next to each other. The two front ones, the holes are facing each other, and the two rear ones, the holes are facing each other. I've never had any trouble. The oiling on the M8 is just a little different than the twin cam, the way it gets its oil up to the lifters also. Okay, so I've got these two facing each other, the oil hose, and these two facing each other. This is the way I like to put them in. Like I said, the oil goes all the way around it. Oil has no shape of its own. Exerts equal pressure in all directions. Cleans, cools, and lubricates. Lifter cuffs on this one. That's why we took the lifter covers off. These S&S lifter cuffs. And they're marked front and rear. This is the rear. And it will hold those lifters from rotating. Where it had those plastic cuffs, now it's got these nice billet cuffs, I guess they are. There we go. Comes with bolts and gaskets. It's already got Loctite on it. Got my little homemade feeler gauge. And lifter cuff bolt started. Get these ran down pretty close. Okay, these bolts are harder than the ones I took out of there. These look to be grade 8 by the markings on them. Okay, I'm just gonna make sure these are ran down kind of close. We have to move a whole lot. We have to use the 2000 feeler gauge, I believe it is. And I just took a big one and just cut it down and trimmed it up. And I slide it right down in there. Put just a little pressure on it. And as you're tightening this up, it's going to try to turn this cuff against this feeler gauge. And we're going to torque that to 100 inch-pounds. We're going to torque that to 100. Pull our feeler gauge out. I'm going to take this magnet and see if they'll fall back down on their own. Sometimes you have to work them a couple times to get some oil up on them. See them fall back down. That's pretty good. If you don't use that feeler gauge, then you don't get them to where they're equal and they'll fall down on their own, they'll bind up. Make sure we got the gasket turned the right way. And they are a little different. And then our lifter covers, remember I said they don't have a front and rear on them that I have found. And make sure we get the right one, they won't go in the wrong place. Put the bolts in them, comes with the bolts, the Loctite already on them, and torques to 140 inch-pounds. Okay, we're back. We got our cam chain on, tensioner on, lifter covers, got lifters in it, got our push rod and tubes here ready to go in. Our timing marks are lined up so we can put in the push rods and tubes for the rear cylinders. We can do them both. Alright? When we get those two put in, then we can turn the engine one complete turn, which will put the cam timing mark up here. Then we can do the front cylinder, both at the same time, while it's at that point. So we'll only have to turn it one time. These are Screaming Eagle push rods. It tells on there intake. This is for the intake. And then there's two for the exhaust. And the difference is the exhausts are longer than the intakes. So we've got to make sure we put them in the right slot. We've got our O-rings in down here. And going to stick the push rod into two. I'm going to screw this bottom in just as far as I can. I'm going to put a little bit of oil right here. Put an O-ring on it. I don't know what Harley uses. Some kind of a sealant on the O-rings. But anyway, up in there, if you look, you'll see sealant the same color as this O-ring, kind of a yellow stuff. You need to take some carburetor cleaner on a rag, take your finger or something, get up in there and try to get that out. Because if you don't, we have had trouble with them leaking. If you'll get that gluey stuff out of there, you'll be a whole lot better off. You'll be a whole lot happier. The push rod has got a dot on it you can use as a reference. Once you get these in there, then you screw them out 2.5 turns. Okay? And then lock them down with this lock nut. So this is a intake. The two intakes are the ones closest to the cylinder. The two exhausts are farther from the cylinder. I got my little paper clip and rubber band to hold the tube, and I'm going to start screwing the push rod out, making it longer. I've got the push rod screwed out. Here, got it, made it longer. So it's up in the rocker arm and it's in the lifter. And it's just barely touching. Not no pressure on it. Just a zero clearance. I'm gonna find my little mark that they put on there, the little dot. And then I'm gonna turn them 2.5 turns. Okay, I know it's hard to see. You got a little dot right here. So if I can get a flashlight to shine on that. Lengthen that push rod 2.5 turns. So it takes 6 flats to make 1 turn. Okay? And I'm going to try to use this little wrench. It just makes it a lot easier. This kind of works like a ratchet. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, there's our dot. That's 1 turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 2 turns. Now we need to do 3 more flats. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's 2.5 turns. We'll run our lock nut up here. Then we need 2 1/2-inch wrenches to lock this where it can't come loose. Kind of awkward to hold 3 wrenches at the same time. Alright, we got 1. And I can already spin it with my fingers. When you put in new lifters, they're not pumped up yet, so you can pretty much turn them just as soon as you put them in. Now if we were going back with the lifters that were in it, it would probably have pressure on it now, and we'd have to wait until that pressure bled off. But with new ones, they pretty much bleed off real quick. But once it makes a couple of rounds, it won't be that easy. On the engine turns a couple of rounds. Make sure the O-ring looks good. Push rod tube back up in there. Our tool, one of our clips, and these are black. They spin and scratch a little easier than chrome. Put that up in there and release the spring tension, and we got 1 of them. Okay, so we only got 3 more to go. So we'll do this one the same way, then we'll turn the engine crank, 1 revolution by the rear wheel. It'll bring this dot up to the top, and then we can adjust the front one. And I always like to stick my fingers in there and put them on the lifters when I get that up to the top and rock it to make sure they're not moving. And then install the 2 front push rods the same way. So we put an intake in, and the next one we'll put in will be an exhaust. Got the push rod tubes, push rods in for the rear cylinder. Now we're going to turn the engine so we can do the front cylinder. Here's our timing mark. So we're going to bring the one on the cam up to the top, and the one on the crank will go all the way around. The gears are 2 different sizes. All right, we're going to bring it around so our timing mark comes back up. There it comes. And there's our timing mark on our crank. And the one for the cam is right up under there. You barely can see it. I like to stick my fingers in here and just turn it to make sure the lifters aren't moving. I can turn it that much and the lifters aren't moving. Does it have to be perfect? No. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put the other 2 push rods in. Put this S&S intake on. Some new injectors. A little bigger size, not sure which size that old hand. New injectors. Yeah. I'll try to get this S&S intake, injectors and all in there in one piece. It's a little tricky, but here you go. Gotta make sure we don't mess up the intake seals. Trying to get it in there. Automatic lift goes down automatically. Looks good. Ball Allen wrench. Spark plugs out, put him in 4 new spark plugs. Put a little anti-seize on the threads and some dielectric grease up in the plug wire boot itself. Alright, got the plugs ready. There's a pretty good little hole down here that they go in. I usually just take a magnet stick and drop them down in there. Get them started just a little. See it down in there? Okay. We'll put the other 2 plugs in now on the left side. We've already got the push rods and all in. Should be good to go ahead and put our plugs in. Customers complaining about oil transfer into his primary. His transmission was a little low last time he changed it, so we're going to put him in one of these Greg Williamson push rods, touch push rods. It's a little thicker in diameter, slows down the oil transfer. That's pretty much normal. It just slows it down to a more usable amount. Won't get hardly as much in there. So we'll take the derby cover off, and then we want to get in here and get this snap ring out. And these can be able to, especially if your snap ring pliers are not doing too good. All right, it popped off just as I got it out of there. Pull this little right bearing out. Pull this rod out. And if you look at them, you can see that this new one is thicker up here where the oil transfers, runs from the transmission over into the primary. We'll slide it in there. Then we're going to hope that we get the snap ring back in there easy enough. Go ahead and push it in as far as I can. Look at it stay there for a minute. Okay. Snap rings back in. All I gotta do now is just put the derby cover back on.
So we got done with Jim's bike, which was a 117 CVO. We put the 22XE cam in it. It had the tabs, mufflers on it with zombie baffles, and Vance and Hines head pipe, the power duals on it. And we had the stock CVO style air cleaner. It was a drag specialty brand. So that's the setup that we got on the bike. The blue lines is what the bike come in here with. This was our torque curve, this was our horsepower curve, and he had 87 and 106, and this is our finished. So this is our torque curve, and this is our horsepower curve in SAE, and it's 117 and 133. So that's the before and after that he's got with it. This right here is just his dyno sheet in SAE, 117, 133. This is what we just call it the internet sheet, but it's in standard. This is what a lot of the internet are showing. So it's 119 and 135 in standard. We do think that he would have got a little better numbers on the top side with a different air cleaner like a Trask. You can see where it kind of flattens out. I believe it would have pulled on up with just a little better. We've had some trouble with drag specialty air cleaners being a little bit restrictive, especially when they got a lot of oil landing on the top, and we think we're seeing that a little bit here. But the bike turned out great. Lots of torque, lots of usable power. This right here was his clutch graph, and that right there is a little bit of an issue for him. The clutch would not lock up solid. He's going to go home and put him a new clutch in it and get that taken care of. But when you see a graph not come up and start falling down, it's got a clutch slip. And anytime that it's got stuff like this where the clutch just wouldn't lock up, it actually didn't lock back up solid until 6,000 RPM, about right here. The reason it will break loose here is usually this is max torque. So the clutch doesn't typically break loose under horsepower. You can have 150 horsepower. You know, on stock clutches that might even try to slip if we don't have crazy torque in the beginning. But when you're building a lot of torque down low, the clutch wants to turn loose. So he's got to definitely put some clutches in it and smooth out his run a little bit. So everything turned out good. The bike runs great. We're fixing to get it off the dyno for him and let him go test it. Guys, one thing that me and Ava was going to point out was the air cleaner. This is a very restrictive air cleaner. It's the drag specialty with the blue oil in it. That's how you can tell it apart. The K&Ns flow a lot better, or just an all aftermarket filter assembly too. This was going to be one of the holdbacks on the horsepower for this bike. This bike would have made, in my opinion, about 4 to 7 more horsepower with a different breather. We didn't, customer didn't want to change it out, and we didn't have one anyways. He likes this style and everything, but he wasn't chasing max horsepower numbers. He's a 2-up rider and was looking for good usable torque, so he was happy with what he got. But remember, when you have this air filter, if you want max power, you've got to change it out. Just throwing that out there, guys.